In this video, we're going to go ape. We're going to go to the planet of the apes, that is, and talk about the franchise and the comic book connections of this intellectual property up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. Before we get started, please click like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Check out the description of this video for links to my Instagram, my whatnot, my eBay store, my email. Check it all out. Appreciate it if you do. I'd like to thank everyone for stopping by. So we're going to talk about licensed properties. Now, licensed properties, comics, there are generally three main types of comics. There are the corporate-owned comics that were created for comic books. Characters were created for comic books. Mainly your most popular superheroes, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, Hulk, Wolverine, etc. Then there are the creator-owned ones, which largely, but not entirely, came out of the independent comic movement in the 1990s, but there are characters in the 80s. But Spawn, for instance, is owned by Todd McFarlane. Savage Dragon by Eric Larson. And sometimes creators do sell these. Cerebus by Dave Sim and ElfQuest by Wendy and Richard Pinney. And that's a lot of independent titles do that. And the independents like Dark Horse and Image, and prior to that, Kitchen Sink and Comico and Eclipse, let the creators retain rights. And sometimes those rights are tangled up. They're not always that simple, but like Dave Stevens created Rocketeer. And then there's licensed properties. Now, the independents often rely on a lot of licensed properties to bring familiar readers to it, but DC and Marvel do that also. Everything from Star Trek to Scooby-Doo, Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Transformers, pulp characters like Tarzan, Conan, the Shadow, the Phantom, Doc Savage, Flash Gordon, the Green Hornet, the Lone Ranger. All of those characters have been in different comic series over the years, and sometimes Marvel, sometimes DC, sometimes independents. It depends upon who has the license for the property. Now, one of those licensed properties is the Planet of the Apes. And there's a new movie out, and there have been some comics out recently, but I want to take a look at the history of the franchise and the history of the franchise in comic books. So the Planet of the Apes began as a novel by the French novelist Pierre Boulle, La Planète des Singes, published in 1963. Boulle was also known for the novel The Bridge on the River Kwai, which was adapted into an Academy Award-winning film. And quickly, the novel was translated into English under the title of The Planet of the Apes. In the UK, it went under the title Monkey Planet. But you can see here, Pierre Boulle, author of Bridge on the River Kwai. And the film rights were acquired by Universal, right? It's a Universal film. I'm sorry. The film rights were acquired by 20th Century Fox. And in 1968, they made a major motion picture starring Oscar winners Charlton Heston and Kim Hunter, also with Roddy McDowall, Morris Evans, directed by Franklin J. Schaffner, who would win the Academy Award for Best Director 2 years later for Patton, and written by Michael Wilson and Rod Serling. Rod Serling, of course, famous from the TV show Twilight Zone, where he also served as the host, a show that was known for its shocking surprise endings. And we get one of those in this original film in 1968. It became quite a sensation. And before the time where it was commonplace for movies to have sequels, within 2 years, the movie had the first of 4 sequels. In 1970, it was Beneath the Planet of the Apes, again, starring Hunter. McDowall was not available. This is one of the few times he missed it. Heston had a small role. The star was James Franciscus. Now, the original concept of the book and the movie was a crew of astronauts go to a distant galaxy to explore another planet that possibly can contain life. And in the movie, there is a time travel element to it because it's going to take them so long to get there. They crash on an unfamiliar planet and find the planet populated by apes. So in the second film, Heston sets off into the Forbidden Zone because the apes that we're introduced into the story only occupy a small portion of the planet, and there's this Forbidden Zone that he goes to. Meanwhile, James Franciscus, another astronaut, comes to rescue him. Also, I guess, traveling through time, and is somehow able to find him, and has encounters with the apes, and then a subterranean group of humans. Things don't end well. Then, in 1972, I believe, Escape from the Planet of the Apes with the McDowell and Kim Hunter. They retrofit the spaceship that the astronauts came to the Planet of the Apes in. They go back in time to modern day and are greeted rather peculiarly. People don't know what to make of talking apes. Doesn't end well for them. But they have a baby, right? He grows to adulthood for the next, I don't want that. The next film, The Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, in I think this was 1974. And these are all 20th Century Fox films. Again, Roddy McDowall stars as his own son. And this takes place in late 20th century North America, where apes have been trained to become servants, and then they don't like that, and things go badly for the humans. And there was a final film that takes place a little bit after this with the same general cast of characters, The Battle for the Planet of the Apes, where now the apes are, and this is not depicted in the movie at all, the apes are taking control and the humans are subordinate. This was a phenomenon, an absolute phenomenon. And as a kid of the 1970s, I can tell you the Planet of the Apes was a huge thing. It was one of the biggest intellectual properties out there. This predates Star Wars. And in terms of film, for kids of my generation, I don't think there was a bigger franchise at the time. Really, the only competing franchise I can think of off the top of my head would have been James Bond. And that was probably aimed at a little bit older crowd. That being said, the original film is fairly sophisticated. It does appeal to kids, but it is, in and of itself, a great film. It's an absolute great film. Then shortly after that, there was a TV series, McDowell playing a different character in that, along with Ron Harper and David Naughton. No, I'm sorry, James Naughton, as two, basically a parallel story. Two astronauts land on the Planet of the Apes. It only lasted 14 episodes, about half a season, before it was canceled. And very shortly after that, there was an animated Saturday morning cartoon series, Return to the Planet of the Apes, which is a little bit different. It had similar characters, but also the apes were a little more technologically advanced in that they drove motor vehicles and so on and so forth. Now, I will say this. I've seen the movie. Obviously, I saw the movie as a kid, so maybe I'm a little bit biased in my love for the movie. And I read the book. The movie is better than the book. The book is, kind of bare bones, sets the standard for what's to come. But I don't think there was anything special about it, whereas the screenplay written by Wilson and Serling did explore other elements. And there's a lot of social commentary in there in terms of, class and race and, even animal abuse and basically the future of humanity. And then, so that was the 1970s. Now, in the 1970s, this was huge, right? There was the Mego line of action figures, which produced a lot of superheroes. They also had a Star Trek line. They had Planet of the Apes. Mego famously passed on the Star Wars franchise and then went out of business because they were doing things like Chips and Wizard of Oz and not Star Wars. They had some really cool play sets, which even now I'm like, I want this. I think my friend or my friend's brother had this one. And the characters that they used were more based on the TV series characters. Like that's the James Naughton character, and you can see the Ron Harper character here. The action figures were based on the film. They had the Cornelius character, who was played by Roddy McDowall, Zira, played by Kim Hunter, Dr. Zaius, played by Morris Evans. But they had Soldier Apes, but I don't think they had Taylor, the Charlton Heston character, the human in the story. One of the other things that they had was this Halloween costume. Now, for 70s kids, your Halloween costume was almost always Ben Cooper, where you got this plastic mask with a rubber band in the back and like this maybe flammable costume that went with it, which was just basically like a large smock. I'm pretty sure this was my 4th grade costume. There may have been another character that I went with a friend. Maybe we were different. Maybe I had a soldier ape. I'm not sure. But this was Planet of the Apes was, I'm pretty sure it was 4th grade Halloween costume. Now, let's fast forward. Now, the property kind of went into a little bit of hibernation for about 20 plus years. And it wasn't until 2001 where Tim Burton adapted the novel maybe a little more closely with Mark Wahlberg, Tim Roth, Helena Bonham Carter, Michael Clark Duncan, and produced this film. It was a standalone. And the ending of this film, is much closer to the ending of the novel than the original 1968 film is. But, using more advanced special effects and makeup. Although I will say the makeup in the original film did win a Special Academy Award for John Chambers. I'm pretty sure at the time the Academy did not have a annual makeup category, but the Chambers, who developed the makeup of the apes, did win a special one in 1968. And then the franchise kind of languished, but in 2011, we saw a 20th Century Fox come up with a new film, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, starring James Franco and Andy Serkis as the ape Caesar, which is the same name that the Roddy McDowall character had in the 1974 Conquest and 1975 Battle films. So he is a version of the same character, basically modern day apes take over. And at this point in time, when you're relieving James Franco in charge of stuff, it was not a good idea. You send him on a hike, he loses his arm, you put him in as a co-host to the Oscars. That didn't go well, and then he had his own problems. So then in 2014, we had Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, 2017, War for the Planet of the Apes, and out now currently in theaters, getting very good reviews from what I've seen, The Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So that's the visual, television and film media that we've seen over the years for this property. What about the comic books? And there have been plenty of them over the years. The very first one was from Gold Key in 1970. It was 25 cents, so it was a big issue. It was the adaptation of the film Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Gold Key, kind of surprisingly, never adapted the original film, and you see some great photos, including Morris Evans as Dr. Zaius here in the bottom corner. There's Charlton Heston's character up there. Now, one thing about this this particular book, there's an ape protest poster inside. There is a poster. So if you see this in the wild, you want to make sure it has the poster or get a significant discount if you just want the book. And it is a pretty faithful re-adaptation of the 1970 film. So that is the first appearance of the Planet of the Apes in comic books and the most valuable. I do have a copy in my waiting to go out to CGC, already been pressed, waiting to go out to CGC pile. Once I get enough books, this is a vintage book from 1970. Once I have 25 of them, I'll be sending that off. And I was pretty stoked, excuse me, to get a copy of this, being a big Planet of the Apes fan. It's kind of a quiet first appearance. I think most people think the first appearance might be the magazine, The Planet of the Apes, from 1974. This was under Marvel's Curtis imprint that they used for their magazines, and there's a lot going on in here. These magazines, I've had a couple of them. I should pick up some more. Exclusive interview with Rod Serling. There's stories that I think the first 6 issues adapt the original film, and then the next several issues adapt Beneath, and then I think they get up to Conquest, but I'm not positive. So some people think this is the first Planet of the Apes comic. It is not. And then Marvel went to the smaller version. I think this is also 1974 for Adventures on the Planet of the Apes, which, again, the first number of issues adapted the film. One of the things, so, I mean, if we look at this, it's a magazine. So, I mean, recently a 9/8 sold for $528 because, again, it's a magazine from 1974. It's hard to find them in high grade. So this actually, well, the Beneath book, not a lot of sales. They have the 9/6 recently went for $576. So that's, a 9/6 has about the same value as a 9/8 of the magazine. And then if we look at the comic book, which came out in 1975, a year after the magazine, 9/8 recently sold for $356, so a little bit less, but still, I mean, if look, not 80, and I think the movie is moving this a little bit, not a lot. And the reason I decided to do this video, because I had done, and I'll post a link at the end, a YouTube short on me going through quickly the Beneath the Planet of the Apes book in the comic I just read series. So, but one of the interesting things about this, and I think there are parallels to, let's say, Star Trek, in that there have been a number of Star Trek books released over the years, and Star Trek does have a rabid fan base, but very few keys. I mean, the first issue is a key. The first several issues in higher grade will command a good value, but subsequent series from the 80s and 90s are complete dollar bin fodder. Now, this, since it's a Bronze Age book, this ran 11. I think the magazine ran 24 issues, 11 issues for the comic book, and the magazine did run maybe 28. And now I want to collect them all. 29 issues. So the last one is a little bit, because the last issue harder to get, lower print run. You're going to have to pay about $20 to get these in halfway decent condition, especially the later issues. And probably the comic book more, like 10. But just like the movies. So these came out around the time of the last movie and the television series and the animated series. And then we're talking about a quarter of a century of hibernation, a little bit less on the comic book side. Malibu published a series in 1990 that ran for how many issues did this run? 20. This might have been 24 issues. Yes, this ran 24 issues. They don't have a ton of value. You see a 9.8 $35 sale in 2021. Not a very desirable book. And I'll be honest, I have some of these. I don't think I have all of them. They're not great. The artwork is Malibu, I mean, look at that cover. That's no bueno. Malibu wasn't getting the cream of the crop creatively to work for them. Nothing against the professionals who did this, but it's just not the best of the batch out there. But some interesting stories if you're a Planet of the Apes fan. Subsequent to that, I said this is a licensed property, so it's been bouncing around over the years. Dark Horse had it later on. They did a mini series in 2001 around the time of the film. There were also some offshoot series. This ran for 6 issues. Again, none of them have really any value. And then there was an adaptation of the Tim Burton film. Again, no cover price, doesn't have any recorded sales. Not, I don't think, because it's rare. Also published by Dark Horse. And then Boom Studios had and they publish a lot of different miniseries. These do have maybe a little bit of value. Series ran for 16 issues from 2011 to 2012. And then most recently, you've had Marvel, especially very recently, getting the franchise, and they did a 5-issue series. There is also a Boom DC crossover with the Green Lantern. That does have a little bit of value. And if we look on Key Collector, I will go to the keys for the Adventure Publications, which is basically an offshoot of Malibu. That's what the 90 series was. And 4-issue limited series of Forbidden Zone. And essentially you have, I guess, there's a good girl art. And then there's, I guess this would be good ape art. Okay, I don't have that. So I haven't had a chance to read the most recent books, nor I think next weekend I'm going to see the movie. But you know, I was saying this is there aren't many keys other than the first issues. The Bronze Age issues do still have value because they are from the Bronze Age and they're a little bit harder to find. And I think folks of my generation who grew up with the movies also have some, and the Mego figures, etc., also have some nostalgia for those comic books. That is our era. And I just recently, in bits and pieces, I think I got a bunch on Whatnot one night. I completed the run of the comic book. And I've kind of set that aside to read. I haven't gotten to that yet because I'm so busy with, other stuff. I don't get a chance to read comic books as much as I would like to. So, and that's one of the things with licensed property. Now, the other thing that's true with Star Wars, Star Trek, and Star Wars is different. And I think that's because now, Star Wars is owned by Disney, which also owns Marvel Comics. So there's a synergy there. And even you go back to the Dark Horse days, new characters have been introduced into the comics and then eventually come to live action. We saw that with Thrawn and Ahsoka Tano and minor characters like Cad Bane and Black Chrysanthemum. And there are a lot of potential there. People are, eager to get copies of first appearance of Dr. Aphra, thinking that character will appear. Planet of the Apes, much like Star Trek, is not one of those series where the comic books are testing grounds for intellectual property. And so we don't see stories. And again, there has been 14 issues of episode television series in the 70s, five films in the original run, another in 2001, and another 4 currently. 20th Century Fox hasn't been churning out a lot of material. And I wonder if that'll change. You look at the success of the Godzilla franchise and the Kong franchise and how they did the Monarch television series. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Planet of the Apes TV series at some point. But the question is, will any of the characters in the comics, and you look at those, you don't see any key first appearances for characters that haven't come to the movies yet. There's just not that kind of synergy between the comics and the TV series or the movies, much like Star Trek, and as opposed to Star Wars, where you see first appearance, maybe somebody will appear on a Disney Plus series. Maybe they'll be in a movie at some point. So I guess it depends on how the licenses work with the properties. The other thing, too, is it's work for hire for artists and writers, so they're not really incentivized to create new characters, which become intellectual property of Disney or Warner Brothers Discovery. If you have a fresh idea, and Jeff Johns doing the what do they call it, the Red Coat series and all of that over for Image, that's creator owned. James Tynion IV, a lot of creator owned stuff like Something Is Killing the Children, still doing they're still doing great stuff in superhero comics for both of those, mostly for DC. But their real unique ideas they're going to bring to an independent title where it's creator owned. So anyway, I'd like to thank you for stopping by. Let me know what you think of that. Are you a Planet of the Apes fan? Have you seen the film? No spoilers, please. I'm going to see it in a week. Do you have any of the comic books? And let me know what you think. I appreciate it. I'd like to thank you for stopping by. You can take a look at a couple of my other videos here. And this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.